Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about a different kind of dependent clause than I think you've talked about before. So let's just review really quickly. So we talked about this a few days ago, but independent clauses are clauses that can stand alone. Dependent clauses are clauses that can't stand alone. Now, normally when you think of a dependent clause, you think of something that looks like this. So they begin with one of our subordinating conjunctions, when, because, whenever, until. If they come second in the sentence, they don't need a comma. If they come first in the sentence, they do need a comma, that kind of thing. But there's a whole other type of dependent clause, okay? And these begin with something called a relative pronoun, okay? Go ahead and fill in that blank for me. All right, and the relative pronoun acts as the subject of that clause, right? Clause has to have a subject and verb. So the relative pronoun acts as the subject, all right, and stops the clause from standing alone. So the most common relative pronouns are that, which, whichever, who, and whoever, okay? So let's look at some examples. My aunt, who is a musician, taught me how to play the piano. So who is my relative pronoun? It's also the subject of this clause, okay? But it acts as the subject and stops it from standing alone, because if I just say, who is a musician to you, unless I'm asking a question, that's going to be really confusing, okay? So our next one, I need to tell whoever is going to the store to get some milk. Same thing. Whoever is going to the store, it's a dependent clause starting with our relative pronoun, whoever. All right, the jewels that were stolen cost a lot of money. That were stolen is my dependent clause here, starting with the relative pronoun that. Again, that is my subject and stops the clause from standing alone, okay? John Glenn, who was the first American to orbit the Earth, became a senator. So notice, again, I got my dependent clause here, starting with the relative pronoun, okay? That's the subject of the clause and stops it from standing alone. The Apollo program had a lunar module that was able to land on the moon. That was able to land on the moon. All right, and scrolling down, the Sputnik 1, which was launched in 1957, was the first artificial satellite. Now, for our next one, I want you to type in which one is the dependent clause with the relative pronoun. The Challenger, which had 7 astronauts on board, exploded in midair. Okay, so you should have typed in which had 7 astronauts on board. Okay? Now, another thing to notice here, some of these clauses have commas around them and some do not. So how do we decide when to put the commas? So some of the clauses are what we call restrictive, okay? And some are what we call non-restrictive. So let's fill that in the blank. Restrictive, non-restrictive. No, we're not in study hall. Hold on. Not right now. Sorry about that. Early 6th graders. All right. Some of the clauses are restrictive. Some are non-restrictive. Okay, so let's talk about the difference. All right. A restrictive clause does not need commas. Okay? So restrictive clauses cannot be taken out of the sentence without changing the meaning. So they don't have commas, and you can't take them out of the sentence. Okay? So here's an example. The student who sits in the back of the room asks a lot of questions. So if I take out that who sits in the back of the room, you have no idea which student I'm talking about. Okay? It really confuses the meaning of the sentence. Okay? Let's scroll, or let's, for you, flip over, look at the other side. The results that I obtained may invoke positive social change. So that I obtained is my clause. If I take it out, you don't know what results I'm talking about. Okay? And again, notice no commas. The journalist whose story I read yesterday has won prizes for her work. Whose story I read yesterday, can't take it out, could be any journalist, okay? Doesn't have commas. Now, a non-restrictive clause does need commas. They add information, but they can be taken out without changing the meaning. So I want to take my father, Mark Smith, for all his love and support. Only got one father, so you can take out Mark Smith. We don't need to say his name, it's just adding information. The hypothesis, which I tested throughout the research, was rejected. Same thing, that's what you do to a hypothesis. So it's added information, but it doesn't change the meaning if we take it out. I have found the article, which I have been looking for. Again, adds information, not necessarily the meaning of the article. If I found it, obviously I was looking for it. Okay? So hint, clauses that start with which are always non-restrictive, and clauses that start with that are always restrictive.